Welcome to Finance Malta. I'm Vanessa MacDonald, and here with me today I have Declan Ohannrachain, who is from Cascade. You're one of the founders. Can I start by saying, have you already actually got a presence in Malta?
Not yet, although we're quite close to signing our first client here, so we're quite excited about that. We first came to Malta only in June, because it's quite a similar market in a lot of ways to Luxembourg, which is where we're based. And I must admit, we found the Maltese quite receptive to us, quite generous with their time and advice, and particularly Finance Malta have been quite helpful. And that's one of the reasons we sponsor this event.
How very interesting. Let's talk a little bit about what you actually do, because what you are involved with is basically helping companies with compliance. Where do you start? I mean, problems now with AML and KYC and all these other acronyms. So explain to me what you do.
Yeah, so I mean, I've been working in the financial sector for more than 25 years. I know I look only 21, but I'm actually a little bit older than that. And in my lifetime, I had the pleasure of becoming what is called an MLRO in 2002, when they kind of invented the concept.
I was going to say that was still a time where they were just thinking about it.
Early days were the good old days, because
we didn't even know what KYC was in those days.
Exactly. I mean, it was a case of if somebody sent you a passport, that was it. And over the years, the requirements on a lot of companies, especially SMEs, which in a way is what Cascade kind of targets, has exploded. I mean, the regulatory authorities are increasing the demands on people to perform anti-money laundering checks, and obviously know your client in terms of not just getting a passport, but also things like proof of address, and then if it's company, the statutes, who are the beneficial owners, and a lot of companies,
source of wealth, everything. My gosh.
Absolutely. So a lot of companies, in a way, struggle. And I myself was working in a Manco, and we had very similar problems to what I think most of the market now have, in that we had a lot of different clients. There was some clients who were directors as well as investors, as well as beneficial owners, and ultimately kind of keeping track of who was where and what we needed to gather from all these people was becoming more and more complex. So we kind of looked at the market to find a solution that would suit us. And unfortunately, as again a lot of people in the financial sector may have noticed, is the minute there's a software aimed at the financial sector, it just seems to come with an extra zero on the end, just because. And we saw a lot of very nice tools, but the reality was, for some of the most expensive platforms, they're really aimed at the JP Morgans, the Bank of New York's,
which is why you're looking at SMEs, yes.
Exactly.
Not everybody can, can afford that kind of
absolutely. And also, I mean, a lot of those softwares, they're catering for almost a global type client, but the reality is we would only use 20-25% of probably all the functionality. So what the market seemed to be missing was something that was, as I said, aimed at SMEs, that kind of ticked a lot of boxes, in particular in helping them organize their AML KYC, because the reality is a lot of people working in the financial sector, they're not necessarily experts of anti-money laundering. So having a software that kind of guides them through the steps that ultimately the regulator expects them to do, and helps them document what they've done, because that's probably the biggest change. In terms of historically, you get a couple of documents, passports, some kind of bank statement, etc., and you just file them away. Whereas nowadays, what the authorities are really expecting is that you have a risk-based approach, which means that it's not just about the documents, it's not just about name screening to see if the person's on a sanction list or if they're a PEP, etc. It's also having some kind of questionnaire which helps you prove the checks you've carried out, etc. And as I said, one of the objectives of Cascade in particular is to give our clients that framework, so that ultimately it's easier for them to show to the auditors and authorities what they've done, why they've done something, in order to get their final analysis completed. And I think that's where we're quite useful to most of our clients.
There's quite a cautionary tale in this, because the fact that you are an SME doesn't mean that you can avoid fines. I mean, if you do get caught out with the wrong, in bed with the wrong person, so to speak, the fines can still be quite hefty, can't they?
Absolutely. And I think, unfortunately, The regulators are actually one of our best marketing partners, because the more they find people, the more people become aware of the risks they take of not actually performing these checks. And I think if you look at the world today, there is actually a logic, sadly, to a lot of what's been forced onto these companies. I mean, with the Russian invasion of Ukraine recently, at the end of the day,
and all the sanctions, of course.
All the sanctions, they've been adding a lot of people to those sanction lists because they can't be allowed to be seen having people benefit financially from various things. And therefore, yes, identifying who is the beneficial owner through multiple layers of a structure can be complicated, but it's a necessity. And I think, as I mentioned earlier, one of our objectives is to help people kind of structure these org charts of who their client is in order to help them identify who's behind it. Because at the end of the day, if they're found in bed with the wrong person, then there will be fines, and some of the fines are quite substantial. I mean, it's not unheard of fines of hundreds of thousands of euros for companies that aren't necessarily big banks. And the reality is, yes, it takes a bit of time, but people need to protect themselves from those types of events, and the best way to do it is to have something that helps them in proving to the regulators that they have adhered to the legislation.
One of the things we hear very often is the fact that it's a bit of a moving target, and as soon as you've caught up with regulation, the goalposts are moved. Yeah. How does Cascade keep up with that? Because that must be quite difficult, even though you've got your own expertise.
Yeah, I mean, but one of the key elements about Cascade and why we're kind of a little bit different to some of the other platforms on the market is that a lot of what we allow our clients is to customize their own version of Cascade. And as a result, we have clients in 12 jurisdictions, users in 25 jurisdictions, because the reality is what we're giving them is the framework of a risk-based approach, and that's what the legislation is.
So that takes into account your different tax requirements, your reporting requirements, your regulatory requirements. They're different in every single jurisdiction.
They are, and therefore it's important that when you're selling a software kind of internationally, that it is customizable, because effectively we'll deliver a platform where there's kind of, I'd say, standards. So our users, they just kind of tweak the standards to best suit their market. And this means that as new legislation comes out, so let's just say that the regulator decides that they now want additional documentation, or they expect people to ask additional questions about proliferation, was all the rage there recently. Well, people can just open up that Cascade, add in those questions into the database, or add in a new document that is required, and then the users of that platform, they'll see the new requirements. And because you've digitalized your client list and you've digitalized your AML KYC process, effectively, if you add a new requirement somewhere, the people who have the dashboard overview, they'll suddenly say, oh, for these clients, we haven't yet done everything because we've now added these new requirements. So, I mean, yes, the goalposts are continuously moving, so one of the objectives has to be to make it as easy as possible for our clients, not just to be aware that, yes, the goalposts have moved, but have we actually caught up for all our existing clients? Because very often a lot of these people have kind of dusty folders sitting in a cupboard somewhere, and they kind of don't necessarily pull open that drawer and find them. So therefore having something digitalized where it kind of will flag, okay, you're missing documents, or this guy's coming up for review, is massively important.
I think you're going to be kept busy for a long time to come. Declan, thank you so much for being with us and introducing us to your company.
It was a pleasure. Thank you very much, Vanessa.